It's predicted to be the biggest health issue affecting the community by the year 2020.
About 1 in 5 Australians are likely to experience depression at least once in their lives, and we know that most of those people will have experienced their first episode of depression before they reach adulthood.
For Paige Williams, the first depressive episode came when she was just 10 years old.
I felt like I was worthless and felt that I wasn't needed and felt that there was no future for me.
She's now studying fine arts at TAFE, but can clearly remember the darkest days of her illness. At 13, she was diagnosed with depression after she attempted suicide. She says it's not hard to see why other teenagers are prone to the illness.
I wasn't very liked at school, and the students just don't realise how hurtful they can be to other people.
What's concerning is that depression is becoming more common.
Depression is a problem that's occurring at a greater rate with each generation. We're not completely certain why that is, but it's been observed not just in Australia but in other countries.
Professor Phil Hazel says the increase cannot be explained simply because doctors are better at recognising depression or because of the pressures placed on young people today. But despite the increase, it's still often unrecognised in young people as they don't always present symptoms such as becoming withdrawn.
If anything, they're more likely to be a bit spiky and grumpy. And that spiky and grumpiness kind of puts people off rather than making them want to be sympathetic and helpful.
But more help is needed. Paige has big plans for her future, including to travel, teach and continue her photography. But she is still being treated for depression and says more compassion is needed from the community.
I would just want people to acknowledge and to understand and to reach out if they know anyone who may be suffering from depression and give them a hand and lift them up to make them smile again.
Tomorrow we look at the alarming rate of type 1 diabetes, where the Hunter now has one of the highest rates in the world.
A toll transport rig carrying a container of sulphur sparked the emergency when it crashed off Industrial Drive just after 8:30 as morning peak traffic headed into Newcastle. Police and the Roads and Traffic Authority are trying to establish whether the load shifting, mechanical failure or driver error caused the vehicle to leave the road.
He's collided with a telegraph pole and the load has then turned over, and there was a fire which started as a result of power lines being brought down in the area.
Emergency services responded en masse to find one of their worst fears: live wires on the footpath, a grass fire burning and some of the container's potentially toxic content smouldering just metres from the BP fuel terminal.
We've got men with BA on and they'll have spilled his clothing on when handling it.
The 42-year-old truck driver escaped injury. However, fuel terminal employees were evacuated until fumes from the smouldering sulphur could be extinguished. In addition to the accident response, a huge traffic snarl had to be alleviated.
All the traffic signals in the area have been altered to assist with the traffic flow around the area, so hopefully we'll manage it as best we can for the period of time we're going to be here for.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
In February this year, Raymond Colin Smith pleaded guilty to 3 acts of indecency charges. Today, his defence lawyer John Anthony and Crown Solicitor David Morehouse made final submissions in Newcastle District Court before his sentencing. Back in September 1999, Smith was the chief engineer on board the MV Island Mercy, run by Christian Aid Agency, which berthed at Onglapo City in the Philippines. Its mission was to deliver aid to the poor, and during that time, Smith met 2 6-year-old girls. The Crown said he led the girls by the hand and led them up to his room and gave them toys. He then took off their clothes. Smith then molested the girls and took photos. But lawyer John Anthony said Smith had indicated to him that it was the girls who took off their clothes. One of them reported the assault. Smith later confessed and federal police moved in. At the time, Smith was on a 3-year bond after being convicted of 23 child sex offences in Queensland in 1997. He was released despite a psychiatric report which identified him as a high-risk reoffender. In an apology letter from Smith to a ship director, Smith said of the victims, "I would have given my life to protect them from injury, but unfortunately I screwed up and hurt them emotionally." He added, "Up to 3 years ago I had an addiction to pornography and it's polluted my thinking." He'll be sentenced in a fortnight. Vanessa Trezise, NBN News.
A front-runner for country selection, hooker Ryan Dagwell has overcome a leg injury to reach the final. His skipper, Scott Conley, has done likewise. A premiership winner with the Knights in '97, the Newcastle captain rates the prize on offer this weekend up there with the best.
It's everything to me, mate. You know, the young guys that are here, they're just jumping out of their skin, and it's fantastic to be a part of it.
It's been a long time between drinks for Illawarra, who last won when Tommy Bishop was winding down his career.
It's a long time ago, so the guys spoke about being part of that history if we can get a result. So it'd be great for the Illawarra area and the football in this area.
Halfback Mark Simon will certainly be one to watch. Brother to former NRL players John and Craig, the younger sibling carries the same dynamic style that has him earmarked by a Sydney club. He's held them off so far as a country title and jumper beckons.
I'll probably play out the season, what I'm doing now, and back myself to get a club next year.
In Newcastle Rugby League competition, tonight's match has been postponed until later in the month, while all other matches are on tomorrow, with Central looking to roll neighbours Lakes, who are missing representative players.
Police made an arrest this morning just metres from the Mayfield flat where 49-year-old John William Barr was murdered yesterday afternoon.
We had a person of interest that we wanted to speak to. We couldn't locate him during the night, but he did turn up in Carrington Street this morning while police were still guarding the victim's residence, and he has been arrested. He's been interviewed by detectives in at Newcastle Police Station. He has been charged with murder and bail refused.
Police say Mr Barr died of blood loss from a large wound to his neck. A neighbour raised the alarm after the 49-year-old stumbled from his flat bleeding but died shortly after ambulance officers arrived. Police say the victim and the charged man were not strangers.
He is known to the victim. He's a 28-year-old man who lives in the Mayfield area, and he is an associate of the victim.
A man will face Newcastle Bail Court tomorrow. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
This footage shot by a nearby resident at around 2:30 shows the intensity of the blaze in Ivy Street, Dudley, that killed Michelle Black of Adamstown.
At one stage she looked like though she may have escaped the fire, but slipped back inside and was unfortunately trapped. Some neighbours did attempt to rescue her by breaching the back windows, but unfortunately they couldn't get to her.
Today, the Fire Investigation Unit and police forensic officers examined the burnt-out shell, looking for clues on how the outbreak started. The cause later identified as a gas heater left on in the lounge room. Only an hour earlier, many of the same firefighters had battled a blaze in this Algona Street home. It was also extensively damaged, but for an 86-year-old resident inside, it was a lucky escape. Passers-by rescued the man, who's now recovering in hospital. Fire Brigade Inspector Wayne Highland says the Charlestown fire was also started by a heater left on, and the overnight incidents have prompted a public warning.
They should have a plan, an escape plan first and foremost, but more importantly they should be turning their any electrical appliance off, not only at the actual appliance itself but at the actual socket on the wall.
Cullen Robinson, NBN News.
A state junior representative, Nikki Garrett, was ineligible to win the district crown as she heralds from Tuggerah Lakes. It didn't stop her from shooting successive rounds 75. Newcastle's Julie Swanson was the one they all had to catch. Heading into the final round with a one-shot lead, the three-time winner was holding firm. Vicky Tart applied the pressure. The Waratah Club golfer was gunning for her third title, but last year's winner couldn't match Swanson. The state rep walking away with a 5-stroke win and in good form ahead of the state amateur champs next month. At Port Stephens, it was trainee pros out to show their wares on the Testing Horizons layout. Sydney sider Alan Cleal from Camden Valley was among those trying to tame the course and came close with this monster putt. Former Australian Tour card holder Kurt Lind found the going on the 15th a little rough, though the Belmont golfer recovered on the green. One player who has found form recently is Ryan Smith. He came into today's tournament on the back of a win yesterday at his home course of Newcastle. In the end, though, no one could better Joanne Bannerman and Ben Lindskog, who both finished 1 under.
Yeah, it's a good time for the boys just to relax and get over a few injuries, and probably getting to the stage of the year now where people are getting a bit fatigued, so it's good to freshen up.
Dungog's dairy factory has become a stark reminder of decline for what was once the area's main industry. First, local milk processing ended, then in recent years industry deregulation has seen only the strongest farmers hang on to challenge interstate competition. In what's hoped to be another step to address the blows, Council is negotiating to sell the factory for the development of a metal manufacturing business which will diversify the local economy.
It's bringing in money from outside the Shire, production process, then the products are sold back outside the Shire again, mainly in the Sydney and Newcastle markets.
Dungog manufacturing is expected to create 15 new jobs within months. There are hopes the redevelopment will attract a share of Canberra's levy on milk to fund job creation. Dungog is among the communities hardest hit by dairy deregulation, but has been underwhelmed by its share of the cash.
Dairy wrap, we're hopeful, fingers crossed, that the government will see the benefit that we have.
It may not be the only new development for Dungog, with council fielding inquiries from other businesses interested in relocating to the Shire. Gary Blair, NBN News.
"34-year-old Melanie Davis, who's out on bail, and 37-year-old James Edward Geddes, who's in custody, are yet to make a plea. They're accused of fatally stabbing Charles Turner in front of a Housing Commission block on the 25th of February last year. Giving evidence today, Jacqueline Cook, a witness to the events who first met Davis at a methadone program. She said both defendants had bumped into Mr Turner, who they knew, and started arguing. Jacqueline Cook gave evidence that Davis started screaming abuse at the victim, claiming because of him she'd suffered a miscarriage years earlier. She claimed Davis lunged at him with a broken beer bottle, then grabbed a nearby garden stake, Mr Turner doing the same. She said she glanced down to her side and James Geddes produced a knife and chased Mr Turner around a shrub several times. But Geddes' solicitor said her evidence in relation to a knife was contrary to a prior statement because she was lying, something Miss Cook denied, claiming she saw Davis raise the stake above her head with both hands and deliver 2 to 3 blows on the back of the victim's spine and back. But Davis's solicitor claimed Miss Cook was embellishing the story due to her dislike of Davis. The hearing will continue later this month. Vanessa Trezise, NBN News.
Parenting is regarded by many as the most rewarding but also the most difficult role in life. Now a new kit has been released that aims to help parents deal with the different aspects and stages of childhood. Some 70 different issues are covered.
We've put a label on the back of each one that includes the contact name and number of the services in the local areas that of Maitland and Cessnock that are the most appropriate for people to call.
According to psychologist John Waring, parents often resort to how they were brought up to bring up their own kids.
We're operating off 20-year-old memories, which may not have been terrific. If they are, well, we might go on with how our parents parented us. But for many people, that might not have been such a great experience.
The kit was devised in consultation with the Maitland and Cessnock communities as a crime prevention strategy.
If we want to change society, if we want to reduce things like mental health rates, mental health problems or drug and alcohol abuse, crime rates, where we need to put our time, our energies into the 0 to 5s.
Tanya Carlisle, NBN News.
We've been hit. Get up on deck, get out as quick as possible.
Prime Minister Howard arrived at Fort Scratchley during a downpour, drove straight past a brewing storm of protest over the refugee crisis before being officially greeted with a bang. Built in 1882, Fort Scratchley is the only coastal fort in Australia to engage an enemy surface target, a Japanese submarine that shelled Newcastle in June 1942. Today, Mr Howard dedicated the fort to all who serve.
A continuing memorial and continuing monument to all the men and women in the past, now and in the present, who serve this country.
His visit also signalled the start of an extensive restoration.
And I'm delighted that the federal government has been able to provide some $4.26 million, and as an accompaniment to the handing over of the care of Fort Scratchley to the Newcastle City Council.
But it seems Mr Howard's favourite part of the fort is its view. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Now a combination of two rugby zones, the North Coast started well, leading 12-0 before Anthony Partridge got the home side going. Former country centre Michael Huxley was still providing some headaches for the Newcastle attack, but not even that could keep the home side out, with Nathan Croft finding room for Mark O'Brien and a 7-point lead. It only got bigger after the break, with Doug North heading his side in the right direction before finding Richard Hankin, who touched down. North grabbed one for himself and a fourth for Newcastle to secure an all-important bonus point. The visitors hung in, getting back within 11 points midway through the second half. But boasting several country stars, Newcastle was full of running. Cockatoo fullback Nathan Croft showing he's not out of place at fly half. Aaron Thompson was lucky to stay in one piece, while a Hamilton connection finished off Newcastle's day with Andrew Kilgore and North scoring again to make it 49-19.
It was 110 years ago today that construction began on one of the defining symbols of Newcastle.
They originally accepted this plan back in the 1880s. So they had a vision that Newcastle would be a great place, which it is today, and they had this cathedral designed to meet the needs of, the 21st century.
The foundation stone of Christ Church Cathedral was laid in 1892 by the then State Governor, the Earl of Jersey. Today, the anniversary was celebrated with a visit from his modern counterpart, Mari Bashir, who also caught a steam train up from Sydney. Before a service was held to mark the occasion. 110 years on, the cathedral still dominates Newcastle's skyline.
I think people have this cathedral in their hearts and minds, whether they're religious or not, as a real icon of the city's stability and continuity.
And it's that stability the community has looked to in trying times, none more than after the 1989 earthquake. A memorial service was held in the structure that itself was severely damaged. But after a $15 million restoration program, the cathedral now belies its age.
John Morris is enjoying the best season of his career and hoped that would lead to an extension to his current deal with Newcastle. Instead, it's priced him out of the club, an irony not lost on the player or his coach.
The bottom line is we'd love to keep everybody, and especially players that have come through the system here and that have done so well. And John this year's been, one of our best players week to week.
Still hopeful of reaching a deal to stay with the club, Morris can see his future lay elsewhere.
With the calibre of players we've got here in Newcastle, it's always going to be hard to start in this team, and Hagues would love to keep me as that utility role, but I'd like to start as well, and I've sort of got to look after myself.
The race will be on to sign the Scone Junior, who actually knocked back a more lucrative deal last season with Parramatta.
My main aim is to stay switched on and play the best footy I can, and hopefully the offer should come just from that.
He follows Clinton O'Brien in being allowed to speak with other clubs as Newcastle continues to plan for future seasons and stay under the cap restrictions.
It's a very fine juggling act, and there's got to be some pain somewhere.
As for the side, it will continue preparations for the Storm, hoping state players pull through Origin 2 unscathed. Clint Newton, meanwhile, carries a suspected broken bone in his hand, but should be right to play if required. Jim Callanan, NBN News. Playing away, University was under siege early against the Magpies, but were able to hold the home team out. Gosford came close a number of times, but Uni's defence set them up for a second-half charge and a 2-goal win. In Black Diamond AFL, Terrigal defended the Challenge Cup trophy, while there were some big blowouts at other venues, including a 19-goal win for the Blues. A 25-strong representative side to play the National Defence Force team this Sunday is dominated by Cardiff, with 11 Hawks players named. Although Newcastle's National Netball League stars Lara Wellham and Danielle Harvey enjoyed the Sandpipers win at the weekend, not all locals were happy. In the earlier State League local derby, the Hunters held a slim lead. As the clock wound down, though, their goals dried up, while Charlestown enjoyed a shooting spree to win a close one, 42-39. And in racing, Newcastle galloper Lovely Jubbly is being set for successive Group 1 victories after winning the Sires Produce Stakes at Eagle Farm at the weekend. The 2-year-old is now gunning for the TJ Smith Stakes next Monday at the same track, which would cap a great season for the David Throsby trained runner.
Perched up high over the shore, the spotter searches for scores of fish off Jimmy's Beach at Hawk's Nest. For these fishermen, it's one of the only ways left for them to make a catch after the Department of Fisheries tightened the net on the way they operate. On Friday, they, along with colleagues from across Port Stephens, discovered their practice of netting from sunset to sunrise in the bay had been banned. Another technique known as mash netting was also limited from 3 hours a day to 1.
The nets are all legal. They came and checked our nets out, our boats out, and said, OK, they're all legal, and then all of a sudden it's closed.
Fisheries say the men had been copying the practice of pound or figure 6 netting, which was banned in 1999, and that it made the decision to try and protect bream and blackfish stocks. But the fishermen say stocks are fine, citing this season's catch, which was considered the best in years, as evidence the move is unnecessary.
We've had 2 bad years, and this year's a good one, and all of a sudden they come out and close it. I think, it's totally wrong.
Cullen Robinson, NBN News.
"60 years ago today, World War II came to Newcastle. In the early hours of June the 8th, 1942, a Japanese submarine began shelling the city from Stockton Bight, and the gun crews of Fort Scratchley were quick to react.
We took post on the gun. It was quite obvious what was happening then because there were SAR shells in the air. Newcastle was lit up like Luna Park, and we had to wait for order from the observation post from Captain Wally Watson as to what we were going to do about it and what the target was, because it was unseen at that time.
Now 82, ex-Sergeant Jim Cannon was firing the guns during today's commemorations and reliving the night he returned fire on the enemy.
And for about 5 or 6 seconds you could see the Japanese crew working feverishly on the gun, and the next thing, bang, that shell came in. It came in, the turbulence from it that landed in Parnell Place took my giggle out off and pulled it off my head.
Of the 34 rounds fired by the sub, only a handful of the shells actually exploded. Some have been kept as souvenirs.
But they did fire on the fort, they fired on BHP, and they fired on the shipyard, which was the old shipyard at Walsh Island. So they knew exactly what they were firing at.
Under return fire from the fort, the Japanese submerged and slipped away. The I-21 was one of 5 craft that had launched the midget sub-attack on Sydney Harbour a week earlier.
I was a little boy in Carrington at the time, and we were actually put under the beds, and it was quite something for these star shells and rounds, and there's noise, that was quite a lot of noise.
Tonight's reenactment will get underway in just over half an hour. The fort will be closed to the public, but the guns and the siren will be heard as they were 60 years ago today. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Dropping in for a promotion before the main game, you could well have used the Westpac Rescue Chopper to dry out Townsend Oval. Even they can't save poor finishing, with the Blues dropping the first real chance. Steve Ebrell, meanwhile, launched others into flight. Both sides had further chances before Brendan Hills booted first points. A 2-0 lead was soon 6 as Lions centre Chris Hunt charged through the Blues for the game's first try. A clever kick by Ty Fallons beat the Blues, but not teammate Scott Lyne, who dived across for a 12-0 lead. He soon rooed this pass that fell perfectly for Jamie O'Connor as the visitors found first points. But little was going the Blues' way. Frustration and penalties soon had Souths on the charge again and up 18-6. But just before the break, the Blues got one back, with Craig Hall sending Craig Wise over to set up an interesting second half. The Lions started the second like the first. 2 good tries had them up 30 points to 12 before the Blues began a huge comeback. Craig Wise was instrumental in the revival with a try that started things, while half Adam Brown was always amongst it. The talented number 7 laid on the match winner, sending Jai Hill try-bound as Northern scored a memorable 32-30 win. Still marked by the scars of battle, Matt Gidley reckons it looks worse than it feels. When looking at the contact he made with Melbourne's Rodney Howe in Saturday's match, you certainly hope so.
And I seen him coming at me, I thought this is going to be pretty solid contact, but I didn't think it was going to be my head.
Copping several stitches above and below the eye, it was his attack that split the storm. Twice his trademark passes led to tries, with Tamana Tahu feasting on the amount of possession he received. Together with some good defence and line breaks of his own, he's the talking point for state selection once again, this time to make the side.
It's a little bit different from what's been happening in the last few weeks. I sort of knew along that if I was playing well with the Knights, then all that stuff would soon fade away. So that's been my main priority, just to try and play well with the Knights.
Playing Parramatta this Friday night will act like a personal State of Origin selection match, with current Blues centre Jamie Lyon in for the Eels.
It'll still be good to, hopefully to have a good game and, maybe get a points decision on them. And if we beat them, that should have a big bearing on it as well.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
The statistics say it all. Men have a shorter lifespan than women, have a higher suicide rate, and are more likely to die of lung cancer and heart disease. They also go to the doctor a lot less than women. All these worrying trends were on the agenda at a meeting of health professionals in Newcastle today.
Certainly what we're trying to do is create a culture where services are keen to recognise that they need to do more to get men involved, and building on what actually works. Because in some ways it's relatively new what we're trying to do, and we as services are still struggling to find out, well, how do we get men there?
But it seems the message may be slowly getting through. A Newcastle-based counselling service has recorded a 35% increase in the number of men seeking help over the past year.
Usually the women or the wives or the partners who used to drag the men along, but we're finding that men on their own accord, I think, are taking the initiative more now than they have before to access these services.
Having 2 new male counsellors is also being credited as part of the reason for the increase. Tanya Carlisle, NBN News.
Born out of the post-BHP search for new industries for Newcastle, the so-called Information Services Centre would employ up to 200 full-time staff, developing and maintaining computer software for both domestic and overseas markets. Costing $1 million, it would attempt to draw international experts as well as utilise local knowledge.
We are good educators of IT, but what we really lacked is that high-profile presence. You know, we aren't known as an IT site, even nationally, let alone internationally.
The centre would also host around 60 information technology students, taking part in lessons both theory-based and practical.
They'll be exposed to systems that are very large, which are rather hard to simulate normally in universities, but also the operator of the system gets the best students.
According to an independent feasibility study to be unveiled tomorrow, the centre would initially inject $6 to $7 million a year into the local economy. Now it just needs a commercial partner to come on board.
What we've got now is that business case, and it's a solid one, and there is already interest. We think it'll happen.
Mark Hughes has basically done nothing since suffering from inflammation to the lining of his heart late last week. It's hoped rest and medication will be enough to cure the problem.
I don't really feel overly confident. I'm just hoping that, this rest has done it good.
He'll train tomorrow to find out, with Kurt Gidley already on standby. However, it's Clint Newton's long-term future with the club that's still to be sorted out, with contract negotiations ongoing.
I hopefully have something sorted out as soon as possible.
Matt Parsons, though, isn't holding his breath for a State of Origin call-up. With Mark O'Mealy now out with a fractured jaw, a Blues jersey is up for grabs, but the prop isn't getting carried away.
That'd be great, mate, but I think they've got other people in mind at the moment, so all I can do is keep going out and playing as well as I can.
His man-of-the-match performance against the Storm followed a big effort against South Sydney. Form his coach believes is almost irresistible.
If you're looking for a form front rower who's played a lot of minutes, who is one of the reasons why we're going so well as a team. They could certainly do a lot worse.
The Knights team to play Parramatta hasn't looked much better this season, with Danny Badeiros and Steve Simpson to return, while Sean Rudder is still to prove his fitness for a match keenly awaited after last year's grand final.
If you can't get yourself ready to play against Parramatta at Parramatta Stadium on Friday night, you've got some problems.
Jim Callanan, NBN News.
It was erected as a sign of intent. Now Protec Steel has state government development consent. The company's currently finalising details to start work on their $600 million Cormorant Road cold rolling mill within 6 months.
We would like to get to financial close and commence construction by the end of this year, by the fourth quarter of this calendar year.
Gary Zamel says Protec wants local participation in the construction phase.
We believe over 50% of this plant will be supplied and funds spent in Australia, and a large part of that in the Hunter region.
Education will be one winner from Newcastle's newest corporate citizen. Protec is already talking with the Hunter Institute of TAFE and Newcastle University about its skill requirements and desire to foster steel research and development. As part of Protec's new age steel industry image, the company has today revealed the Kooragang site will feature a sculpture garden. As well as encouraging sculptors to use steel, it will become a focal point for the community.
Allows the community in Newcastle to feel that this is not an animal that they don't want to go anywhere near, but just the opposite, to actually be part of the community.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
This is Robbie. He is just one of the many injured or sick koalas Jeff and Betty Bartlett have helped. Now Robbie's return to the wild will be all the more stress-free thanks to the opening of the Tomaree Koala Rehabilitation Facility. The centre allows koalas to be slowly eased back into their natural environment in a safe and secure way.
We had to move koalas when they were ready to be for a pre-release off to west of Raymond Terrace or an hour away, which meant that they were unable to finish off their process with the same carers.
The facility is run by the Native Animal Trust Fund, a volunteer organisation, and funded by donations from National Parks and Wildlife, Paul Newman's own foundation, and Nelson Bay RSL. The wildlife carers expect the facility to be put to good use if the past is anything to go by.
In the last 12 months, Betty and I have cared for or had koalas through our hands of numbering 41. And 41 koalas, we had 16 road hits and 5 dog attacks.
Tanya Carlisle, NBN News.
Well, I thought last week in the Knights Storm match, Matthew Gidley got the hit of the week on Rodney Howe. Even if he did tackle him with his head, Howe was forced from the field for the rest of the match. But there has been some talk that Rodney Howe will come back again this week. And I think after a heavy knock like that, a week off would be a smart move. In the same match, I thought it was a special moment to see Andrew Johns line up from the halfway line to kick this ball. He hit the ball sweet and it went straight through the post. Well done, Joey. On to round 14, the grand final replay tonight at Parramatta Stadium. The Knights haven't beaten the Eels there since 1989, and as a matter of interest, coach Michael Hagan actually played in that game. While both these teams have great defensive records, the Knights have scored almost 100 points more this season, and I think that will be the difference tonight, Knights to win. The first two matches on Saturday are tough ones to pick, starting with the Dragon Storm game that starts at 3 p.m. Melbourne have lost their last 6 matches, but they've won their last 3 encounters against St George Illawarra. But I think with Riles and Bailey combining in the front row and the match being played at Wynn Stadium, the Dragons can win. And then there's the Tigers-Panthers clash, which starts at 5:30. The Tigers are in very ordinary form of late and the coach is under pressure. However, the Panthers, I feel, are still on the way up and improving each week. I'm going to tip the Panthers to win. In other games, Warriors, Sharks, Broncos, Roosters to win their games. Good luck with your tips. I'll see you next week. Painful. That is...
They may be at the bottom of the food chain, but these tube worms could soon be worth millions.
We're cultivating marine worms from the larval stage up, so we're not actually going out and digging worms out from nature, we're actually growing them from eggs from the broodstock, and we're growing them to a suitable stage to harvest, which then actually is sold as fishing bait for the fishing bait market.
The farm pumps salt water from the inlet channel to Araring Power Station into the 8 ponds built so far, where each harvest of about 4 million worms takes 6 months to grow. Once preserved in salt, they're sold in packs of 10 for about $5. According to Malada and her father Les, marine worm farms in Japan, the UK and America already supply hundreds of tonnes of product to recreational anglers. Once all 24 ponds are built, the pair hope the locally grown worms will not only be sold at home but worldwide. But will they help you catch a fish?
I would not have any qualms about there being any problems with catching fish on these worms. I guess it just comes down to the fisherman himself and techniques.
Paul Lobb, NBN News.